oil spill. And this prevention thing is huge because we are poised right now as a country to allow drilling in the Arctic, in the Chukchi and Beaufort Seas, where, and as Charles says, we can't clean up oil. They know that quite well in the Gulf now, but they were under some illusions that they could get it beforehand. Everybody knows ahead of time in the Arctic, we can't get the oil out of the water. You can't do it.
Right.
And yet we're poised to allow that. The folks that I work with and that I am privileged enough to represent at Point Hope, I was in D.C. with them last week. They were pleading with people in the White House, with people at the Interior Department, with people on Capitol Hill, saying, please do something to help us because we're next. This is our garden. This is where we get our food and
our cathedral as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's a really devastating thing, and I really hope the Obama administration in the next couple of weeks wakes up on that one because they have an opportunity to do that.
Do they have the ability just to cancel it?
They have the ability. They have full authority. Secretary Salazar, in a recent decision, a great decision by President Obama and Secretary Salazar to protect the Bering Sea. And that was the Bush plan. Go in there, 5.6 million acres.
Right, 3 days before he left office.
Yeah. Let's go crazy. Let's go, baby.
Yeah. Are you worried about Pebble Mine? Watch this.
Yeah. And so Obama withdrew that area. That
Bristol
was a wonderful decision, Bristol Bay, from outer continental shelf drilling. And and Salazar said at the time, well, it looks like I'm going to take off the table future lease sales in the Beaufort and Chukchi. We need to learn more about those ecosystems. But ironically, he also said, we're going to allow initial exploration to go ahead so we can learn from that exploration. Well, we wrote to him yesterday and said, you have a pretty good lesson to learn from the Gulf. Why don't you hold off in the Arctic and learn that lesson first? Fully incorporate those lessons before you make any decisions about the Arctic. We don't know what he's going to do. July 1st is the day that Shell will be allowed to start drilling there. And they're just terrified in Point Hope. Absolutely, and justifiably terrified. I'm terrified.
Well, they say it's just exploratory drilling.
That's the most risky drilling. If you and in fact, it's the blowouts in history, and MMS says this, the federal reports. I'm a wonk. I look at those things, right? And we see about a blowout every 365 wells that are drilled. You see more blowouts in shallow water than even in the deep water, although it's by a minute amount. It's essentially the same number. I mean, that's what you're talking about here. And the question then becomes how quickly they get it under control and so forth. In the Arctic, it's the Chukchi Sea, Steve. I mean, you know that. It's like way out there. And the ice and the currents and the weather and the darkness at various times of the year. And
yeah, but nobody goes on vacation there.
Yeah, apparently not.
Well, I was thinking of what Charles was saying about the risk-taking. We got to have that choice to make. But the problem is that we don't let the people who are going to suffer the effects of an oil spill make the choice, because if they were, then the Arctic would be protected. We wouldn't be having this debate. Right. Instead, we as a society make this choice, and then other people in not in the centers of population centers, suffer the consequences. People that really do live close to the land and really do need those marine resources or whatever.
But we hear so much about the free market and about capitalism, and we're a capitalistic society, and that these corporations, and you can't be anti-corporate. But in line of what you're saying, what we've seen Exxon do, what we've seen BP do, and multiple other corporations, is that they privatize their profits and they socialize their risk. And so, all of the profits that have come into BP and Exxon and all of these groups, and probably Northern Dynasty and Rio Tinto, that's all good for their shareholders. But as soon as there's a catastrophe, we don't have the option to just go, okay, now that's on you. We can't. They're taking risks with something that isn't theirs. Right. And so the fact that I'm called a socialist when they've socialized their risk is really offensive, because to me the ultimate socialism right now in this country is that the federal government is out there cleaning up the spill. That's the ultimate socialism, and people should be really offended by that, especially when you look at the fact that Exxon did not pay one dime in federal income tax last year. And that the acoustic valve that could have saved this spill, which isn't a spill, it's an oil volcano basically under the ocean. That acoustic it's this apparatus that basically blows up down in the pipe and closes it off. it's run on a remote, it would have cost $500,000. Now I'm hearing lawmakers say, well, that's too expensive to ask them to do. $500,000.
That's what the decision was?
It takes them 11 minutes. 11 minutes BP makes $500,000.
Well, it's
How expensive is this?
Yeah, the blowout, the BOPs aren't adequately tested. That's come out. The kind of casing they use in a really deep well, they're not even really sure that it's sufficient force to pinch them down. And for whatever reason, they finally got the damn thing to fire, and it didn't stop.
Well, this one didn't have the same requirements that they have in Norway and off the coast of South America.
Oh yeah, and even now it's under debate in also in the Arctic Ocean in Canada, where the issue is whether they're going to have to drill a relief well as they drill the exploration well. And all of a sudden, they don't want to talk about that.
Right.
But that was to be required by the Canadian federal government there. The oil companies were starting to press to keep from having.
And ironically, ConocoPhillips said a couple days ago in the Canadian context of the Arctic, don't make quick decisions. Let's learn the lessons from the Gulf first. I'm like, where are you? Come to Alaska, please.
This is
we
so
want
much
some.
better than
Yeah.
It's so much better.
I know, come on, this is what we need to see here. Let's time out, folks. Let's take a deep breath here before we compound this problem elsewhere.
So when we're getting these phone calls, if someone could call you who was in the same position you were in, whether you were a journalist or you're a lawyer or you're a citizen responder or a fisherman like myself, what is your best take? Is it just like, move to Nebraska, they don't have a lot of oil?
Well, there's somebody who's in that position, who's Steve Piku, who is the Southern Alabama University professor who studied the emotional and social and psychological effects of the Exxon Valdez oil spill for 20 years. Well, it just so happens he lives 300 yards from the Gulf of Mexico, and the oil is headed for his house. And if anybody knows the impacts, the suicides, the community disruption, the broken marriages, it's him. And I asked him what he's telling his neighbors, and I thought his advice was great. He was saying, well, take care of each other, stick together. Don't let this, break up. Don't let this create the corrosive community that it did in so many Alaska communities. And then he said, get out there and defend your waters. That the people have to have a sense of control. And I think that's a big part of this, is that it's stripped away from us. And we really do own these waters. This really is our place, and you got to step up and fight for it. Whether it's stopping the oil from being drilled in the first place, as they're trying to do up in Point Hope, or if it's after the oil's been spilled. So, I thought that was profoundly good advice that he's giving them.
It's always good advice to take care of each other, but I don't think it should be blazed over so quickly, the fact that there were so many suicides. How many people had mortgaged their house to buy a boat and permit that was now worth nothing? What did that do to their marriages? You want to look at the effects of family, on family values from an oil spill. It'll rip your guts out to even really go into so many of the stories of so many of Alaskans. Steve, what's your?
Well, my advice to the reporters who are trying to cover this would be, A, take care of yourself and don't burn out. That's really important. I was good for about 7-8 days, and then it was worthless. And stick to your guns, kind of like what Steve Pico was saying. You really need to stick to what you really know, and insist on getting the answers to the questions that need to be asked. The things that you see that don't look right to you.
Right on.
Just insist on getting the right answers.
And go out there and see it for yourself.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, just wear a mask. Quickly, did you two want to add to that what you would say?
Yeah, I would just say, to people that are there trying to volunteer or to protect the places that they love, that they should do that, knowing that, I don't want to say that it's futile, because I think there's some good energy in just trying to do what you can, and if you save one bird, it's worth it. But to also just try to use that bearing witness somehow, to talk to reporters and things like that, because I think it's really important. People really respond to personal stories, and so if we're trying to not have that short attention span make those stories go away, then they need the stories of the individuals there that are really being hurt by this, and it needs to be followed for years. so that we can try to learn these lessons and make choices differently.
We have to go to a break. Can we come back and get your answer to
You
that?
bet.
All right, super. We'll be right back with more Up North. All right, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to More Up North. We have questions from the audience right now, but I wanted to give you a chance to answer the question of what you would put out there for.
Sure, and what I would tell people is dig deep. You're in it for the long haul. You need to make it sustainable for you. Keep your center, and don't trust BP. Don't trust the industry to come in and tell you how things need to be done, because you would not be well represented in that country.
Right, BP loves BP, and they're not going to help you.
That's right.
That's just not how it's going to go, sadly.